A homeless man gave away his last $15. But what happened the next morning shocked an entire city. A homeless man spent his last $15 to help a stranger on a rainy night, and no one in that store thought it meant anything. But less than 24 hours later, 600 motorcycles rolled into town, carrying a truth that left everyone speechless, that sometimes one small choice is all it takes to change an entire life. The rain came down in steady sheets, tapping against the cracked asphalt like fingers drumming out a restless rhythm. It pooled in the shallow dips of the parking lot, reflecting the flickering neon sign above Murphy's Gas and Mart, a tired glow of red and blue that buzzed like it had something to complain about. Daniel Brooks stood just outside the glass doors, under the narrow strip of overhang that offered more illusion than protection. Water still found its way onto his shoulders, seeping through the worn fabric of his jacket. At 52, Daniel had learned how to stand still in the rain without flinching, how to let discomfort pass through him like a temporary visitor. He wrapped his hands around a paper cup long gone cold, more for something to hold than for warmth. The coffee had been handed to him hours ago by a truck driver who didn't make eye contact. Daniel didn't blame him. People rarely looked him in the eye anymore. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. Everything under them looked a little more worn, a little more exposed. The scuffed floor tiles, the overstocked candy shelves, the tired woman behind the counter, and the man standing there now. Daniel's eyes settled on him without meaning to. It was hard not to notice him. The guy was built like a wall, broad shoulders stretching the seams of a black leather vest, rainwater still dripping from the edges. The patches on his back were faded, but unmistakable. Hell's Angels. A few customers kept their distance, their bodies angled away like they might catch something if they got too close. One man in a business coat shifted his wallet from his back pocket to his front without even trying to hide it. The biker didn't seem to notice, or maybe he noticed everything. "Go ahead and try it again," the man said, his voice low but strained, like it had been dragged across too many miles. He slid his card across the counter again, pushing it toward the cashier. The woman behind the register, her name tag read Linda, hesitated just a fraction before taking it. Her fingers moved quickly, swiping the card. Beep. A sharp red light flashed on the machine. She glanced up, offering a tight, practiced smile. "I'm sorry, sir. It's still declining." The man's jaw tightened. He ran a hand down his face, dragging water and frustration along with it. "Try it again." Linda swallowed. She did. Beep. Red again. The sound cut through the store louder than it should have. A quiet ripple moved through the people standing nearby. A couple whispered behind a rack of chips. Someone let out a soft scoff. Daniel shifted his weight slightly, watching. The biker reached into his wallet, pulling out a few crumpled bills. He flattened them on the counter, counting under his breath. 10, 12, 13. He paused, then exhaled slowly. "I'm short," he muttered. Linda looked at the total on the screen. "It's $15, sir." The man stared at the money like it might multiply if he gave it enough time. It didn't. Behind him, the line began to grow restless. "Of course he is," someone muttered. Another voice, louder this time. "Figures." Daniel felt the words land, even though they weren't meant for him. They never were. The biker leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice, but not enough to keep it from carrying. "Look, I don't need all of it. Just the gas and that bag." Linda glanced at the small plastic bag sitting on the counter. Inside, a few items shifted under the fluorescent glare. A bottle of prescription pills, a box of protein bars, a cheap sandwich wrapped in plastic. "Sir," she said carefully, "I can't just... if I don't get this..." His voice cracked, just for a second. just enough to break through the image he carried. Someone's life is on the line. The words hung in the air. For a moment, no one moved. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Not sharp, not sudden, just familiar. He'd heard that kind of desperation before. He'd said it once. Linda glanced nervously toward the back office, where a shadow moved behind a half-closed door. Her fingers hovered near the phone. "I might have to call my manager," she said. The biker shook his head quickly. No, don't do that. Just take the gas. Forget the rest." He reached for the bag, hesitated, then pulled his hand back like it burned. Daniel's eyes followed the motion. Outside, a gust of wind pushed rain against the glass, rattling the door. The neon sign flickered harder, buzzing like it was about to give up. Inside, the tension stretched thin. Someone in line stepped back, putting more space between themselves and the biker. Another person whispered, "Watch him. He might try something." Daniel let out a slow breath. He looked down at his hands, at the worn skin, the faint tremor he couldn't quite get rid of these days. Then he looked back up, at the man at the counter, at the way his shoulders were starting to wall inward, just slightly, at the way the room had already decided who he was. Daniel knew that feeling better than anyone. The question settled quietly in his mind, heavy as the rain outside. What do you do when you have nothing left to give? And more importantly, what do you do when someone else has even less time than you do? The question didn't come with an answer. It never did. Daniel stood there just inside the doorway now, the faint warmth of the store brushing against his damp clothes. The automatic door sighed shut behind him, cutting off the wind but not the feeling that he didn't belong. A few heads turned, not because he made noise, but because he existed. The smell of wet fabric and street air clung to him, drifting into the overly bright space. Someone near the coffee station wrinkled their nose, turning slightly away. A man in a gray hoodie pulled his girlfriend a step closer, like distance could protect them from something unnamed. Daniel didn't react. He'd learned not to. But he felt it. Every time. Linda noticed him too. Her eyes flicked toward him, then quickly back to the man at the counter. Her posture tightened, like she was suddenly dealing with two problems instead of one. "Sir?" she said again to the biker, trying to regain control of the moment. "If you don't have the full amount, I'll have to remove something from the purchase." The biker, Ethan, though no one here knew his name yet, let out a breath that seemed to scrape against his ribs on the way out. He stared down at the plastic bag again. His hand hovered over it. Then slowly, reluctantly, he reached in and pulled out the small white prescription bottle. He held it for a second. Just a second. Long enough for something to flicker across his face. Then he set it back down. "Keep that," he said quietly. "Take the food." Linda blinked, confused. "You sure? You said—" "I know what I said." His voice was sharper now, but underneath it, something was cracking. "I said someone's life depends on this," he continued, softer this time. "I didn't say it was mine." The words landed harder than anyone expected. Even the whispering stopped. Daniel felt it in his chest again, that pull, that quiet, uncomfortable recognition, not of the situation, but of the choice, the kind of choice that doesn't feel like one at all. Behind Ethan, the man in the gray hoodie shook his head. "Man, this is ridiculous," he muttered. "If you can't pay, you can't pay. That's how it works." Another voice chimed in. "Yeah, and we're all supposed to just wait while he figures it out?" A woman near the refrigerated section crossed her arms. Or worse. No one said the word this time. They didn't have to. Ethan's shoulders tensed. His fingers curled slightly against the counter, knuckles whitening for just a moment before he forced them to relax. Daniel watched that too. The control. The effort it took not to react. He knew that effort. Linda glanced again toward the back office, clearly weighing her options. "Sir, I'm going to need you to call your manager," the man in the gray hoodie said louder now. "Or call the police. This is getting out of hand." That did it. Something shifted in the room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. Daniel felt it before he saw it. Ethan's head dipped slightly, like he'd been hit by something invisible. Not hard enough to knock him down, just enough to remind him where he stood. And suddenly, it wasn't about $15 anymore. It was about being reduced to a problem, a threat, a headline waiting to happen. Daniel's grip tightened around the paper cup in his hands. The thin cardboard crumpled slightly under the pressure. He looked down at it. Empty. Just like his pockets. Just like most nights. A few feet away, someone dropped a handful of coins on the floor. They scattered with a soft metallic clatter, rolling in different directions. "Here," the man in the gray hoodie said with a smirk, nudging one of the coins with his shoe. "That should help your friend out." A couple people chuckled. Not loud, but loud enough. Daniel didn't move at first. He just stared at the coins, at the way they spun for a second before settling into stillness, at the way no one bent down to pick them up, at the way everyone pretended this was normal. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. Not toward the counter, toward the floor. He crouched down, joints protesting quietly, and began picking up the coins one by one. His fingers moved carefully, deliberately, like each one mattered, because they did. Even the smallest things did. He placed them gently on the edge of the counter, not looking at anyone as he did. The man in the hoodie raised an eyebrow. "Hey, look at that. Maybe you can cover it after all." More chuckles. Daniel straightened up slowly, his back stiff from the movement. He didn't respond. Didn't need to. But something in his posture had changed. It wasn't submission. It wasn't anger either. It was something quieter. Something steadier. Ethan noticed. Their eyes met for the first time. Just for a second. But in that second, something passed between them. Recognition. Not of faces, not of names, but of something deeper. Something shared. Ethan gave the smallest shake of his head, almost apologetic. "You don't have to do that," he said, voice low. Daniel didn't answer. He just looked at the total on the register, then at the crumpled bills in Ethan's hand, then back at the coins. $15. Such a small number, and somehow, not small at all. Behind them, the line shifted again, impatience building back up now that the moment had stretched too long. "Come on," someone said. "We don't have all night." Linda exhaled, her patience thinning. "Sir, I need a decision. Either you remove items or what?" The words hung there, unspoken, but everyone knew what came next. Daniel did too. He'd been on the receiving end of that "or" more times than he could count. He glanced once more at Ethan, at the bag, at the way the man's hand hovered near it, like letting go would cost more than he could afford. Then Daniel slipped his hand into his coat pocket. It took him a second. Not because he was searching, but because he already knew what was in there, and what it meant to take it out. His fingers closed around the damp, folded bills. All of them. Every last one. He didn't pull them out yet. Not yet. He just stood there, feeling the weight of them, feeling the weight of the choice, and for a brief moment, he hesitated. Because once it was gone, it was gone. The rain tapped harder against the windows. The neon light flickered again, and the room waited. Not for kindness, but for resolution. Daniel slowly lifted his gaze and stepped forward. The movement was small, so small most people wouldn't have noticed it, but in that moment, it felt like the entire room shifted around him. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder. The rain against the glass sharper. Even the air inside the store felt tighter, like it was holding its breath. Daniel reached into his coat pocket. His fingers brushed against the damp bills again, creased, softened by rain, edges worn from being folded too many times. He had counted them earlier that night without even thinking. $15. Every cent he had left. Enough for a cheap meal tomorrow. Maybe a cup of coffee the next morning. Enough to make the next few hours just a little less heavy. He closed his hand around them. For a second, his mind flickered. Images not sharp enough to hurt, but clear enough to feel. A workbench under warm light. Tools lined up in neat rows. The smell of oil and metal, not rain and concrete. A sign out front that once read Brooks Auto. A life where $15 didn't mean survival. Then it was gone. Just like that. He pulled the bills out slowly. The motion caught Linda's attention first. Her eyes dropped to his hand, then back to his face, uncertain. "Sir," she started, not sure which sir she meant anymore. Daniel didn't answer. He stepped up beside Ethan, close enough now that the difference between them wasn't size or presence, but history. Two men standing at the same counter, seen by the world in two very different ways, and yet, not so different at all. Daniel placed the money on the counter, not tossed, not slid. Placed, like it belonged there. "I've got it," he said quietly. The words weren't loud, but they landed harder than anything that had been said all night. For a second, no one reacted. Not Linda, not the customers, not even Ethan. It was like the moment needed time to register. Then Ethan turned, slow, almost disbelieving. "You don't have to do that," he said, his voice rough, the edge gone now. "I got it. I'll figure something out." Daniel shook his head once. "No," he said. "You won't." There was no judgment in it, no accusation, just certainty. Ethan stared at him, searching his face like he was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. "You don't even know me," he said. Daniel met his eyes, and for the first time that night, there was something steady there, something grounded. "I don't need to." Silence. Real silence this time. The kind that doesn't come from discomfort, but from something deeper, something people don't quite know how to respond to. Behind them, the man in the gray hoodie scoffed, but it sounded weaker now. "Man, this is crazy." No one laughed this time. Linda glanced between the two men, then down at the money. Her hands hovered over the register for a second, unsure if she should proceed. Daniel gave a small nod toward the screen. "Go ahead," he said. She hesitated. Then, almost carefully, like she didn't want to break whatever had just happened, she reached forward and pressed the button. The register beeped. A different sound this time. Not rejection. Approval. She took the bills, smoothing them out as best she could before placing them in the drawer. Her movements were slower now, more deliberate, respectful. The total cleared. The moment passed. But it didn't disappear. Linda placed the bag on the counter and pushed it toward Ethan. "It's all set," she said quietly. Ethan didn't move right away. His eyes stayed on Daniel. Something was shifting behind them. Not confusion anymore. Not frustration. Something heavier. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. Daniel shrugged slightly. "Maybe," he said, But here we are. Ethan let out a breath that sounded like it had been building all night. He picked up the bag, his grip tightening around the plastic. "I'll pay you back," he said. "I mean it." Daniel shook his head again. "No, you won't." That caught Ethan off guard. "What?" "You won't," Daniel repeated, calm as ever. "Not because you don't want to, because you don't need to." Ethan frowned. "That doesn't make any sense." Daniel gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Most things don't," he said. Behind them, someone shifted uncomfortably. Another person cleared their throat. The tension in the room had changed shape. Less sharp now, but heavier somehow. The man in the hoodie looked away first, then the woman near the refrigerators. One by one, eyes dropped. Because suddenly, they weren't watching a problem. They were watching a choice. And it said more about them than either of the men at the counter. Ethan reached into his wallet again, slower this time, and pulled out a worn business card. The edges were bent, softened from being carried too long. He held it out. "Take it," he said. "At least let me give you that." Daniel looked at the card. Didn't take it. Not yet. Ethan kept his hand there, steady. "Name's Ethan Cole," he added. "That's my shop, or what's left of it." There was something in his voice now. Not pride. Not quite regret. Something in between. Daniel finally reached out and took the card. His fingers brushed Ethan's for just a second. Cold. Rain-soaked. Real. "Daniel," he said simply. "No last name. Didn't need one." Ethan nodded once. Then he turned, the leather of his vest creaking softly as he moved. He walked toward the door, the bag swinging lightly at his side. The automatic doors opened with a familiar sigh. Cold air rushed in. For a moment, Ethan paused under the neon light, looking back over his shoulder. Not at the room, at Daniel, like he wanted to say something else, something bigger than thank you. But whatever it was, he didn't. He just gave a small nod, then stepped out into the rain. The doors slid shut behind him, and just like that, he was gone. The store didn't go back to normal, not right away. Linda stayed still behind the counter for a second longer than she needed to. The customers avoided each other's eyes now, their earlier confidence gone. Daniel stood where he was, the empty space in his pocket already settling in. $15. Gone. Just like that. He didn't check. Didn't need to. He could feel it. But strangely, it didn't feel like loss. Not the way it usually did. He picked up his empty coffee cup and turned toward the door. No one stopped him this time. No one told him to leave. As he stepped back out into the rain, the cold hit him again, sharp and immediate. The neon light flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows across the wet pavement. Daniel pulled his jacket tighter around himself, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. He walked past the edge of the parking lot, toward the narrow strip of concrete behind the building where he usually slept. The rain softened slightly, falling into a quieter rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, an engine roared to life, then faded. Daniel didn't look back. He didn't know that inside the store, near the back by the refrigerated drinks, a phone was still held up, recording. Didn't know that the last few minutes, the money, the words, the silence, had all been captured. Didn't know that by morning. Millions of people would see what happened in that small, flickering store. Didn't know that the $15 he gave away would come back to him in a way he couldn't possibly imagine. All he knew was that someone needed help. And for once, he didn't walk away. The rain followed him like it always did. Not chasing, not forcing. Just there. Daniel moved around the back of Murphy's Gas and Mart, past the humming generators and the rusted dumpster that leaned slightly to one side. The ground was slick with oil stains and rainwater, the smell of damp cardboard and old grease hanging heavy in the air. This was where he slept. Not because he chose it, because no one stopped him from being here. He pulled a flattened box from behind the dumpster and set it down under the narrow metal awning that barely blocked the rain. It was routine now, automatic, like breathing. Lay it down, check the corners, sit, wait for the body to forget it was tired. He lowered himself slowly, joints stiff from the cold, and leaned back against the brick wall. Water dripped somewhere nearby, a slow, steady tap that matched the rhythm of his thoughts. $15. Gone. He didn't regret it. That surprised him more than anything. Most nights, every coin mattered. Every dollar had a purpose, even if that purpose was just getting through the next morning. But tonight, it felt different. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the rain fill the silence. Inside his mind, he saw it again. The man at the counter, the hesitation, the way his hand hovered over that bag, the way the room had already decided who he was. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he murmured under his breath. "I know that look." A sudden burst of light snapped his eyes open. The back door of the store swung wide, flooding the alley with harsh yellow light. "Hey!" The voice was sharp, immediate. Daniel didn't need to look to know who it was. He turned his head slightly. Tom Bradley, the night manager, stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, the other gripping a flashlight like it was more important than it really was. Mid-40s, clean jacket, always tired, always annoyed. "Can't be back here tonight," Tom said, already stepping forward, boots splashing through shallow puddles. "We got complaints." Daniel didn't move. "From who?" he asked quietly. Tom didn't answer right away. Didn't need to. Daniel already knew. People inside. People who had just watched him give away everything he had. Tom gestured vaguely toward the store. "Customers. They don't like it." Daniel gave a small nod. Of course they didn't. "They didn't mind a few minutes ago," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Tom sighed, rubbing a hand across his forehead. "Look, man, I'm not trying to make this harder than it is. You gotta move along tonight." Daniel let the words settle. Move along. Always moving. Always somewhere else. "Where to?" he asked. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Not my problem." The answer came fast. Too fast. Like he'd said it before. Daniel studied him for a second. Not angry. Not even disappointed. Just tired. "Yeah," he said. "I figured." He pushed himself up slowly, using the wall for support. His body resisted at first, like it wanted to stay right where it was, but staying had never been an option. He picked up the flattened cardboard, folded it once, then tucked it under his arm. Tom stepped back toward the door, already done with the conversation. "Appreciate it," he muttered, though it didn't sound like he did. The light snapped off as the door closed, and just like that, Daniel was back in the dark. The rain had eased into a mist now, drifting sideways under the streetlights. The parking lot was nearly empty, only a few cars left scattered under the flickering glow. Daniel walked slowly, each step deliberate, the damp pavement soft beneath his worn shoes. No destination, just forward. That was enough. As he reached the edge of the lot, a car engine turned over nearby. Headlights cut through the mist, bright and sudden. Daniel paused, instinctively stepping aside. The car rolled past him slowly. Too slowly. For a second, he thought the driver might stop, but the car kept moving, then stopped just short of the exit. Daniel glanced up. The passenger window slid down halfway. A young woman, early 20s maybe, leaned slightly toward the opening, her phone still in her hand. The glow of the screen lit up her face, eyes wide, like she'd just seen something she couldn't quite process. She looked at Daniel, not past him, not through him, at him. That was you, right? She asked. Daniel frowned slightly. What? Inside, she said, lifting the phone just a little. The money. The guy. Daniel shifted his weight. Yeah. She stared at him for a second longer, then glanced down at her screen, replaying something silently. You didn't have to do that, she said. Daniel let out a quiet breath. That seems to be going around tonight. The woman didn't smile, didn't laugh. She just nodded slowly, like she was trying to understand something that didn't fit into the world she was used to. Still, she said, most people wouldn't. Daniel shrugged. Most people got more than $15, he replied. That made her pause. Really pause. Like the answer had gone somewhere deeper than she expected. She looked at him again, something softer in her expression now. Yeah, she said quietly. Maybe that's the problem. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The engine idled. The rain whispered against the pavement. Then a horn honked from behind her car, sharp and impatient. She flinched, glancing in the rearview mirror. Sorry, she muttered, rolling the window back up. I gotta go. Daniel nodded once. Take care. She hesitated for just a second. Then she drove off. The taillights faded into the mist, swallowed by the dark. Daniel stood there a moment longer, watching the empty space where the car had been. Then he turned and kept walking. Didn't know her name. Didn't know what she had on that phone. Didn't know that the video she'd just captured, every word, every moment, every choice, was already sitting in her drafts, waiting. The streetlights stretched out ahead of him, one after another, casting long shadows across the wet sidewalk. Each step echoed faintly, a quiet reminder that he was still here, still moving, still something. Behind him, the gas station hummed on like nothing had changed. But something had. Daniel just didn't know it yet. And somewhere, in the soft glow of a phone screen, the moment he gave away his last $15 was about to begin again. This time, with the whole world watching. But Daniel didn't know that. Not when he turned the corner onto Euclid Avenue, the rain thinning into a cold mist that clung to the air like something unfinished. The street stretched ahead, quiet and dim, broken only by the occasional passing car and the hum of distant traffic. To him, it was just another night, another place to walk until his body gave in. Behind him, inside that car now disappearing into the distance, the young woman, her name was Rachel Pierce, 24, a nursing assistant coming off a double shift, sat gripping her phone a little tighter than before. She hadn't planned on recording anything. At first, it had just been instinct. Something about the tension inside the store. The way people were talking. The way the biker looked like he was about to be pushed into something worse than embarrassment. So she'd hit record. At first, she thought it would be another one of those videos people posted to complain, to expose, to laugh at later with friends. But somewhere between the first beep of the card reader and the moment Daniel placed his money on the counter, something had changed. She replayed it now at a red light, her thumb hovering over the screen. The image was shaky, filmed from a distance, but the sound was clear. "I've got it." She watched Daniel again, stepping forward. No hesitation in the final second. No performance. No looking around to see who was watching. Just doing it. Rachel felt her throat tighten. "Why would you do that?" she whispered to herself, even though she already knew the answer wasn't going to be simple. The light turned green behind her, a horn blaring from the car behind. She jumped slightly, then pressed the gas, but she didn't turn the video off. Miles away, on a highway slick with rain, Ethan Cole rode through the night. The roar of his Harley cut through the darkness, steady and grounded, like the only thing keeping him connected to the road. Water sprayed up from the tires, soaking his boots, his jeans, the lower edges of his vest. He didn't slow down. Couldn't. Time wasn't something he had tonight. The plastic bag was strapped tight against the back of his bike, secured twice over. Every few minutes his hand would drift back, checking it, making sure it was still there. Still safe. Still real. His mind replayed the store over and over again. The looks, the whispers, the moment he almost put the bottle back. And then, that voice. "I've got it." Ethan shook his head slightly, rainwater flying off into the dark. Didn't make sense. Didn't fit the world he knew. A man with nothing, giving everything. He tightened his grip on the handlebars. "Damn it," he muttered into the wind. Not angry, just shaken. He'd seen generosity before. He'd seen loyalty. But this wasn't about either. This was something else. Something quieter. Stronger. And it didn't sit right that he didn't even know the man's last name. Back in Cleveland, Rachel pulled into her apartment complex, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. The rain had slowed to a drizzle now, barely noticeable against the windshield. She didn't get out right away. Instead, she sat there, phone in hand, watching the video one more time. Then again, and again. Each time something new stood out. The way the room went silent. The way people stopped laughing. The way that man, Daniel, never once raised his voice. He didn't try to prove anything, didn't try to look good. He just showed up. Rachel let out a slow breath. This isn't what I thought it was, she murmured. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She tapped the edit button, trimmed the first few seconds, adjusted the brightness just enough to make the figures clearer. She didn't add music, didn't need to. The silence said enough. Then she paused, because she knew what came next. Posting it meant letting it go, letting strangers see it, judge it, twist it, or worse, ignore it. Her eyes flicked back to the moment Daniel placed the money down, the calm in his voice, the finality of it. Rachel swallowed. People need to see this, she said quietly. Her thumb pressed down. Upload. By 2:13 a.m., the video had 300 views. By 3:02 a.m., it had 1,200. At 4:15 a.m., someone had shared it with a caption. Homeless man pays for biker everyone thought was trouble. By sunrise, it had crossed 10,000. Daniel didn't see any of it. He found a bench near an old bus stop a few blocks from the gas station, the metal cold beneath him even through his clothes. The overhead shelter rattled softly in the wind, offering just enough cover to keep the rain from falling directly on him. He sat there, arms folded loosely, head tilted back just slightly. Sleep came in pieces. It always did. Short bursts, never deep. The kind of sleep where you're always half aware of where you are, what you are. A bus rolled past sometime before dawn, its headlights sweeping across his face for just a moment before disappearing into the gray. Daniel didn't move, didn't dream. But somewhere in the quiet of that early morning, something had already started. At 7:08 a.m., the video crossed 50,000 views. By 8:30, it had been reposted on 3 different platforms. By 9:12, it hit 100,000. Comments poured in, some skeptical, staged, fake. Where's the rest of the story? But others felt different. That man didn't hesitate. You can't fake that kind of voice. I don't know who he is, but I hope life gives him something back. At 9:47 a.m., in a glass-walled office overlooking downtown Chicago, a man paused mid-scroll. Richard Cole, 65 years old, silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of presence that didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just passing time between meetings, until the video stopped him. He watched it once, then again. His expression didn't change much, but his eyes narrowed slightly, focused, because he recognized something. Not the man who gave the money, the man receiving it. Ethan, his son. Richard leaned back slowly in his chair. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at the screen, at the silence in the room, at the moment where everything shifted. Then, quietly, he pressed play again. Richard Cole didn't blink. The office around him was silent, except for the faint hum of climate control and the distant murmur of voices beyond the glass walls. The city stretched out behind him in clean lines and polished steel, a world built on precision, order, and control. But the video on his phone, that was something else entirely. He watched the moment again. The hesitation, the tension in the room. The way his son stood there, stripped of everything except urgency. And then, that man, Daniel, stepping forward. Not loudly, not dramatically, just stepping in. I've got it. Richard leaned back in his chair, fingers resting lightly against his lips. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, not even in surprise, in recognition. Because he knew that kind of moment, the kind where everything could turn one way or another, and someone chose to carry the weight instead of passing it along. He paused the video. The frame froze on Daniel's face. Worn, tired, rain-soaked, invisible. Except he wasn't invisible anymore. Richard exhaled slowly. "Who are you?" he murmured. Across the desk, his assistant, Margaret, looked up from her tablet. "Sir?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned the phone slightly, sliding it across the desk. "Find him." Margaret leaned forward, adjusting her glasses as she watched the clip. Her brow furrowed slightly as she took in the scene. "That's Ethan," she said. "I know," Richard replied. Her eyes flicked back to him. "Do you want me to reach out to—" "No." The word was firm, final. Richard's gaze stayed on the frozen image. "I don't need to find my son," he said quietly. "I need to find the man who stood up for him." Margaret nodded slowly, already tapping on her tablet. "It may take some time. There's no name in the video." "There will be," Richard said. Not hopeful, certain, because things like this didn't stay hidden. Not anymore. By mid-morning, the video had crossed 500,000 views. News outlets hadn't picked it up yet, but smaller blogs had. Social media pages, comment threads that stretched for miles, arguing over what it meant. Some called Daniel a hero, others called it fake. But no one No one ignored it. Rachel sat on her couch, still in her scrubs, staring at the numbers climbing faster than she could process. Her phone buzzed constantly. Notifications, messages, strangers asking questions she didn't know how to answer. Who is he? Where did this happen? Is that guy okay? She scrolled through the comments, heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected anything, really. Just a few views. Maybe a couple of shares. Not this, not this. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed out a reply under her original post. I don't know his name. It happened last night at Murphy's Gas and Mart on Euclid Avenue. He looked like he had nothing, but he gave everything anyway. She hit post. And just like that, the search began. Daniel woke to the sound of a bus braking nearby. The sharp hiss of air cut through the morning like a blade, pulling him out of the shallow sleep he'd drifted into sometime before dawn. He blinked slowly, eyes adjusting to the gray light. Morning. Another one. He sat up, stretching his shoulders carefully, feeling the stiffness settle into place like it always did. The bench beneath him was still cold, damp from the night air. His stomach tightened. Not pain, just emptiness. He rubbed his hands together, trying to bring some warmth back into them, then stood up. Same routine. Find coffee if he could. Keep moving. Stay out of the way. The city was waking up now. Cars passing more frequently. People walking with purpose, heads down, earbuds in. No one looked at him. That hadn't changed. He made his way back toward Murphy's, not for shelter, but for familiarity. Sometimes they threw out food in the mornings. Sometimes he got lucky. As he turned the corner, something felt off. The parking lot was busier than usual. 2 cars sat near the entrance, engines still running. A couple of people stood outside, phones in their hands, glancing between the screen and the store. Daniel slowed his steps. A flicker of unease settled in his chest. Inside, the store looked the same. Same lights, same shelves, same counter. But the air was different. He stepped inside, and for the first time since he could remember, people looked at him, not past him, not through him, at him. A woman near the coffee station nudged the man beside her. That's him, she whispered, not quietly enough. The man's eyes widened slightly. You sure? I think so. Look at the jacket. Daniel frowned. What? Linda stood behind the counter, frozen mid-motion, a cup halfway to the coffee machine. Her eyes met his, and something like shock flickered across her face. Daniel, she said slowly. The name hung in the air. He blinked. How do you... Before he could finish, someone stepped forward. The man in the gray hoodie from the night before. But he looked different now. Not smug. Not amused. Uncertain. You're the guy from the video, he said. Daniel's brow furrowed deeper. What video? The man hesitated, then pulled out his phone, tapping quickly. He turned the screen, and suddenly, Daniel was looking at himself, standing at the counter, placing the money down, saying the words he barely remembered saying. I've got it. The room went quiet again. But this time, it wasn't judgment. It was something else. Something Daniel couldn't quite name. He stared at the screen, confusion settling over his features. That's last night, he said. Linda nodded slowly. Someone recorded it. It's everywhere. Everywhere? Daniel repeated. The word didn't make sense, didn't fit. He glanced around the store again, noticing the phones now. The way people held them. The way they watched him like he was suddenly something more than a man trying to get through the day. A knot tightened in his chest. Not fear. Not yet. But something close. I didn't do anything, he said quietly. No one responded right away, because they'd all seen it, and they knew he had. Outside, another car pulled into the lot, then another, and another. Daniel didn't notice. Not yet. But something was building, something bigger than a single moment, bigger than $15, and somewhere, miles away, Richard Cole's team had just found a name, Daniel Brooks, and they were already on their way. But Daniel didn't know that. All he knew was that something had shifted, and not in a way he understood. He stood there in the middle of Murphy's Gas and Mart, the faint smell of burnt coffee and cleaning chemicals hanging in the air, watching strangers watch him. Really watch him. It made his skin feel tight, uncomfortable, like he was standing under a light that wasn't meant for him. I didn't do anything special, he said again, quieter this time, almost like he was trying to convince himself. The man in the gray hoodie shook his head slowly. Man, that's the thing. You did. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have the words for it. Didn't have the space in his life for whatever this moment was trying to become. He turned slightly, heading toward the coffee station out of habit more than intention. Linda was already there, but instead of stepping in front of him like she usually did, blocking, redirecting, keeping him away from the machines, she stepped back. Go ahead, she said. The words were soft, careful, like she wasn't sure how to talk to him anymore. Daniel paused. That had never happened before. He looked at her, confused. You don't have to. I know, she interrupted gently. Just go ahead. Something in her voice had changed. Respect. Not loud. Not dramatic. But there. Daniel hesitated, then reached for a paper cup. His hands moved slowly, like he expected someone to stop him at any second. No one did. The machine hissed softly as the coffee poured, steam rising in thin curls. The smell hit him, strong, bitter, familiar. For a moment, it felt like something close to normal, until he turned and saw the phones again. 3 of them now, maybe 4. People pretending not to stare, but staring anyway. A woman near the door lifted her phone slightly higher, trying to be discreet. She wasn't. Daniel's grip tightened around the cup. This ain't right, he muttered under his breath. He took a step back, then another. I'm just gonna go, he said, not to anyone in particular. No one stopped him, but they didn't look away either. As he pushed through the door, the cool morning air hit him again, sharper than before. The sky had cleared, leaving behind that washed-out gray that comes after a long night of rain. The parking lot was no longer quiet. Cars lined the edges now, not full, but more than usual, and more were coming. Daniel frowned slightly, stepping off the curb. Something wasn't sitting right. He started walking. Faster this time. Not running, but not lingering either. He cut across the street, heading toward a row of boarded-up storefronts where fewer people paid attention. Behind him, a car door slammed, then another. Voices carried faintly through the air. Is that him? Yeah, that's him. Look at the jacket. Daniel didn't turn around. Didn't need to. He'd heard that tone before. Different words, same feeling. He picked up his pace. The city felt louder now, closer, like everything had moved in a few inches overnight. At the end of the block, he ducked into an alley between 2 buildings, the shadows still thick enough to offer some cover. He leaned against the wall, breathing out slowly. What the hell is going on? He whispered. For the first time since last night. Doubt crept in. Not about what he did. but about what it meant now. Across town, in a black SUV moving steadily through morning traffic, two men sat in the back seat, both in tailored suits that didn't belong anywhere near Murphy's Gas and Mart. Margaret sat between them, tablet in hand, reviewing the file that had been pulled together in less than 2 hours. "Daniel Brooks," she said, glancing up. 52, former owner of Brooks Auto Repair. Closed about 10 years ago. Richard Cole sat beside her, silent, looking out the window as the city blurred past. "What happened?" he asked. Margaret tapped the screen, scrolling. "Officially, inventory loss, insurance dispute, financial collapse." Richard turned slightly. "Officially?" She met his eyes. There were allegations, theft, internal involvement. Richard's expression didn't change. "And unofficially?" Margaret hesitated, then answered, "Reputation damage. Community turned on him. Lost clients. Eventually, lost everything." Richard leaned back again, his gaze distant now. "All over an accusation," he said quietly. "Yes." He nodded once, not surprised, just familiar. "Find the details," he said. "I want to know exactly who made that accusation." Margaret didn't ask why. She just nodded, already working on it. Miles away, Ethan finally slowed his bike. The sun was higher now, cutting through the last of the clouds, but the road still shimmered with leftover rain. He pulled into a small roadside diner, the kind of place that didn't ask questions and didn't care who you were. He killed the engine. The silence hit him harder than the wind had. For a second, he just sat there, hands still gripping the handlebars. Then he reached back, checked the bag. Still there. He let out a breath. Inside, the diner smelled like grease and coffee. A waitress in her 40s nodded at him from behind the counter. "Seat yourself," she called. Ethan slid into a booth near the window, the leather cracked and worn. He didn't bother looking at the menu. "Coffee," he said when she approached. She poured it without a word. As she turned to leave, something on the TV above the counter caught his attention. Muted, but playing. A video. Grainy, shaky, familiar. Ethan's eyes locked onto the screen, and there it was. The store. The counter. Him. And then, Daniel, stepping forward. "I've got it." Ethan sat back slowly, the weight of it settling in all over again. But this time, it wasn't just in his memory. It was everywhere. The waitress noticed his focus. "You know that guy?" she asked, nodding toward the screen. Ethan didn't look away. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." She studied him for a second, then shrugged. "Whole internet's talking about it. Kinda rare seeing something like that." Ethan nodded slightly. "Yeah," he murmured. "Real rare." He reached into his pocket, pulling out the business card he'd given away the night before. Except, it wasn't there. His hand stilled. Then he remembered. He'd given it to Daniel. Ethan exhaled slowly. A strange feeling settled in his chest. Not worry. Not exactly. But something close to responsibility. He glanced back at the screen. At the moment, everything changed. And for the first time since he left that store, he understood something clearly. This wasn't over. Not even close. Back in the alley, Daniel pushed himself off the wall. The noise from the street was getting louder, closer. He stepped out carefully, peering around the corner. More cars, more people. And now, a camera crew. Not big, but enough. A man with a microphone, a woman adjusting a lens. Daniel stepped back instantly, heart picking up speed. "No," he muttered. No, no, no. This wasn't his world. Never had been. He turned to leave through the other end of the alley and stopped, because at the far end, just pulling up to the curb, was a black SUV. Clean, expensive, out of place. The door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, sharp, controlled, the kind of presence that didn't need to speak to be heard. Daniel didn't know who he was, not yet. But something deep in his gut told him this moment was about to change everything. Daniel felt it before he understood it. The way the air seemed to tighten, the way the sounds of the street, engines, voices, footsteps, blurred into something distant, like they were happening behind glass. The black SUV idled at the curb, its engine barely making a sound. Clean lines, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in this part of Cleveland. Not here. Not in a place where paint peeled from brick and sidewalks cracked under years of neglect. The door opened slowly, and the man who stepped out didn't rush. He didn't look around like he was lost, didn't carry himself like someone out of place. He moved like the world adjusted around him. Richard Cole. Daniel didn't know the name yet, but he knew the presence. Tall, controlled, dressed in a dark coat that hadn't seen rain or wear, silver hair brushed back neatly, eyes sharp but calm, like he was used to seeing things clearly, even when others couldn't. He closed the car door behind him with a quiet, deliberate motion. Then he looked straight at Daniel, not past him, not around him, at him. That alone was enough to unsettle Daniel. Most people didn't do that. Most people either ignored him or glanced too quickly, like looking too long might mean something. But this man, he held the gaze, measured it, understood it. Daniel shifted slightly, instinct telling him to step back, to disappear into the alley where things were simpler, quieter, safer. But his feet didn't move. "Daniel Brooks?" the man asked. His voice was low, even, not loud, but it carried. Daniel frowned. "How do you know my name?" The man stepped closer, stopping just short of the edge of the alley. Not invading, not crowding, just close enough to be heard without raising his voice. "I saw what you did last night," he said. Daniel exhaled slowly, tension settling into his shoulders. "Yeah," he muttered. "Seems like everybody did." The man studied him for a moment, not judging, not impressed, just seeing. "My name is Richard Cole," he said finally. The name meant nothing to Daniel, not yet. He nodded once. "Okay." A faint hint of something crossed Richard's expression. Not disappointment, not surprise, just acknowledgement. Of course he wouldn't recognize it. Why would he? "I'm looking for a man who gave away his last $15, Richard continued, to help someone everyone else had already decided didn't deserve it. Daniel shook his head slightly. "You're wasting your time." "I don't think I am." Daniel let out a quiet breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, man, I don't know what you want from me," he said. "I just paid for something. That's it." Richard took another step forward, still calm, still controlled. "That's not it," he said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "It is to me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The street noise drifted back in, cars passing, distant voices, the faint buzz of a camera crew setting up somewhere nearby. Then Richard reached into his coat pocket. Daniel's body tensed slightly, instinct kicking in, but Richard only pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen, turned it, held it up. The video. Again. Daniel watched it play, himself stepping forward, placing the money down, speaking words he barely remembered saying. I've got it. He looked away before it finished. I told you, he said quietly. That's all it was. Richard lowered the phone. No, he said. That's what it looked like. Daniel glanced back at him. And what does it look like to you? Richard didn't hesitate. It looks like a man who knows what it costs to be left behind. The words landed differently, not loud, not dramatic, but precise. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, something he didn't want to examine too closely. You don't know anything about me, he said, his voice tighter now. Richard held his gaze. I know enough to ask the right questions. Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah? Then here's one for you, he said. Why do you care? That stopped the moment, for just a second. Not because Richard didn't have an answer, but because he chose which one to give. Finally, he spoke. Because the man you helped last night is my son. The world didn't stop. Cars kept moving. Voices kept talking. But for Daniel, everything narrowed. Your son? He repeated. Richard nodded once. Ethan Cole. Daniel blinked. The biker. The man in the store. The one everyone had already judged. That guy? Daniel asked, disbelief slipping through. That guy, Richard confirmed. Daniel shook his head slowly. Well, he didn't say that. No, Richard said. He wouldn't. Something about that felt true. Daniel looked away for a moment, processing, then back. So what? You're here to pay me back? He asked. There was no hope in the question, no expectation, just assumption. Richard's expression didn't change. No, he said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. No? No. Richard slipped his phone back into his pocket. I'm here because I want to understand why you did it. Daniel stared at him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, he laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just tired. You drove all the way out here, he said, to ask me why I gave somebody $15? Yes. Daniel shook his head again. That's crazy. Maybe, Richard said, but I've learned that the moments that look small rarely are. Silence settled between them again. Daniel leaned back slightly against the wall, folding his arms. You really want to know? He said. I do. Daniel looked down at the ground, at the cracks in the pavement, at the water still pooling in the uneven edges. Then he spoke. Because somebody should have done the same for me, he said. Simple. Direct. No performance. Richard didn't respond right away. He just nodded slowly, like he'd expected something like that. But they didn't, he said. Daniel met his eyes again. No, he replied. They didn't. Another pause. Longer this time. Heavier. Then Richard took a breath. And if I told you, he said carefully, that what happened to you wasn't what you think it was. Daniel's brow furrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Richard stepped just a little closer. Not enough to crowd him. Just enough to shift the weight of the moment. It means, he said, that the story you've been living with for the past 10 years might not be the truth. The words hit harder than anything else had. Daniel straightened slightly. That's not something you get to say, he said, his voice low. I wouldn't say it if I wasn't certain. Daniel shook his head. You don't know what you're talking about. I do. Richard's tone didn't rise, didn't push, but it didn't back down either. I had my team look into your case this morning, he continued. The inventory loss, the accusations, the way everything collapsed around you. Daniel's chest tightened. You had no right. And what I found, Richard said, cutting gently but firmly through the words, wasn't theft. Silence. Real silence. The kind that presses in. Daniel's hands curled slightly at his sides. Then what was it? He asked. Richard held his gaze. It was a setup. The word hung in the air, heavy, impossible. Daniel stared at him, waiting for something to make it make sense. It didn't. Who? He asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard's expression didn't change. That, he said, is why I'm here. Behind them, the street noise grew louder. More cars, more voices, more movement. Something was building. And Daniel, for the first time in a long time, wasn't just trying to survive the moment. He was standing in the middle of something he didn't understand. Something bigger than him. Something that reached back into the past he'd tried to bury. And for the first time, he didn't know if he wanted the truth, or if he was ready to hear it. Daniel's breath came slower now. He didn't realize he had been holding it. The alley suddenly felt too small. The walls too close. The weight of Richard Cole's words pressing in like something physical. A setup. The phrase echoed in his mind, repeating itself over and over, refusing to settle into something he could accept. That's not possible, Daniel said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. Richard didn't argue. He simply watched, waiting. Because men like Daniel didn't accept truth easily, not when they'd spent years surviving without it. You're telling me, Daniel continued, pushing off the wall now, pacing a few steps before turning back, that everything that happened, the police, the bank, the people who turned on me? Yes, Richard said quietly. Daniel shook his head hard, like he could physically throw the idea away. No, that's not how it works. I signed the papers. I saw the numbers. Inventory was gone. Half of it, Richard corrected. Daniel stopped. What? Half the shipment, Richard said. Not all of it. And the records that followed were altered. Daniel stared at him. That word again. Altered. It cracked something open. Because deep down, there had always been a part of him that didn't understand, didn't add up. He'd checked those numbers again and again back then, lost sleep over them, tried to find the missing pieces that never made sense. But when the accusations came, when people started whispering, when the bank froze his credit, it didn't matter what made sense anymore. It only mattered what people believed. Who? Daniel asked again, his voice steadier now, but heavier. Richard didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. Clean, crisp, completely out of place in this alley. He held it out. Daniel hesitated, then took it. The paper felt strange in his hands, too smooth, too official. He unfolded it slowly. Names, transactions, dates. Details he hadn't seen in over a decade. But one name jumped out immediately. Marcus Hale. Daniel's grip tightened. No, he whispered. His former business partner. The man who had stood beside him the day the first sign went up over Brooks Auto. The man who had sworn they were building something that would last. That's not right, Daniel said, though his eyes stayed locked on the page. Marcus wouldn't. He already did, Richard replied. The words were calm, final. Daniel's chest rose sharply as he looked up. You don't know him, he said, his voice rising for the first time. You don't know what we built. That place, I know exactly what you built, Richard said, not louder, but stronger. That stopped him, because there was no doubt in that voice, only certainty. And I know what it looks like when someone decides they want it for themselves, Richard continued. Daniel looked back down at the paper, at the signatures, at the transfers, at the timeline that suddenly made too much sense. The missing inventory, the accusations that came too fast, the insurance claim that never cleared, the bank that shut him out overnight, the customers who disappeared like they'd been waiting for a reason. His knees felt weak, not from age, from realization. I went to his house, Daniel said suddenly, his voice distant now, pulled from memory. After it all started, I asked him what was going on. He swallowed. He told me to let it go. The words tasted different now, different meaning, different weight. Richard nodded slightly. Because he knew you couldn't prove anything. Daniel let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck inside him for years. He took everything, he said quietly. No, Richard corrected again. Daniel looked up, confusion flickering. He took your business, Richard said. The rest, you gave away. Daniel blinked. What? Your reputation, Richard clarified. Your voice and your belief that you deserved to fight back. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's easy to say when you weren't the one standing there, he snapped. I've stood there, Richard replied. That stopped him again. Something in the way he said it. Not defensive, not emotional, just true. Daniel studied him for a second, then looked away. I lost everything, he muttered. And you kept going, Richard said. Daniel laughed once, short, dry. Is that what you call this? He asked, gesturing vaguely at the alley, at himself. I call it surviving, Richard said. Silence fell again. But this time, it felt different, not empty. Full, like something long buried had just been pulled to the surface. From the street, the noise grew louder. Engines, multiple, deep, low. Daniel glanced toward the alley entrance. What is that? He asked. Richard turned his head slightly, listening. Then he looked back at Daniel. They're here. Daniel frowned. Who's here? Richard didn't answer right away, because the answer was already arriving. The first motorcycle turned the corner, then another, then 5 more. The sound filled the street, loud, steady, unmistakable, engines rumbling in unison like a heartbeat too big to ignore. Daniel stepped forward slightly, eyes narrowing. What the hell? The bikes kept coming. Black leather, chrome, patches catching the morning light. People on the sidewalks began to stop. Phones lifted again, voices rising. Within seconds, the street outside Murphy's Gas and Mart was no longer just a street. It was a gathering, a presence, a force, and at the front of it, Ethan Cole pulled to a stop. He killed the engine, the sudden quiet almost deafening after the roar. For a moment, he just sat there. Then he swung his leg over the bike and stood. His eyes found Daniel immediately, and this time, there was no distance, no misunderstanding, just recognition, and something more, something stronger. Behind him, dozens more riders idled, waiting. But they weren't the end. They were only the beginning, because as the sound echoed down the block, more engines answered, from farther away, from different streets, from across the city. And Daniel, standing in the mouth of that alley, finally understood one thing. The $15 he gave away last night was coming back. But not in the way he expected, not even close. The sound didn't stop. It grew. What began as a distant rumble turned into something heavier, deeper, like thunder rolling across asphalt instead of sky. The street outside Murphy's Gas and Mart filled with motion, chrome catching the morning light, leather vests shifting as riders slowed, circled, then lined up in a formation that felt anything but random. Daniel stepped out of the alley. He didn't mean to. His body just moved, pulled forward by something he couldn't name. By the time he reached the edge of the sidewalk, the first wave had already stopped. Engines idled, low and steady, vibrating through the ground beneath his feet. People gathered along the curb. Neighbors, strangers, the same ones who had walked past him for years without a second glance. Now they stared. Phones were up again, whispers turning into open questions. Is this a rally? What's going on? Why here? Daniel didn't hear them clearly. His attention was fixed on one thing. Ethan. The biker stepped off his motorcycle, boots hitting the pavement with quiet certainty. He removed his gloves slowly, tucking them into his jacket before walking forward. Each step deliberate, each movement controlled. But there was something else there too, something heavier. He stopped a few feet in front of Daniel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the engines, the crowd, the city, it all faded into the background. It was just them. You didn't have to do that, Ethan said finally, echoing words from the night before. Daniel gave a small shrug. Seems like I did. Ethan nodded once, then glanced over his shoulder. Daniel followed his gaze. More bikes. Still coming. Turning the corner in groups now, 10, 20 at a time, each one falling into place like they'd rehearsed it. What is this? Daniel asked quietly. Ethan turned back to him. This, he said, is what happens when someone does something that matters. Daniel frowned. For $15? Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. For what it stood for. Before Daniel could respond, another engine cut through the noise, deeper, heavier than the rest. Heads turned. A larger bike rolled forward, its chrome polished to a mirror shine. The man riding it was older, mid-60s, maybe, but there was nothing slow or uncertain about him. Big Mike Morrison, president of one of the largest Hells Angels chapters in the Midwest. He brought the bike to a stop from just ahead of Ethan and cut the engine. Silence followed. Not complete, but enough. The kind of silence that demands attention. He swung his leg over and stood, adjusting his vest as he stepped forward. His presence was different from Ethan's. He didn't carry tension. He carried authority. His eyes landed on Daniel and stayed there. You Daniel Brooks? He asked. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. Big Mike studied him for a second longer, then gave a slow nod of his own. Name's Mike, he said. Friends call me Big Mike. Daniel didn't respond, didn't know how to. Mike glanced around at the crowd, at the phones, at the tension still lingering in the air. Then he looked back at Daniel. You know why we're here? Daniel shook his head. No. Mike let out a breath. Because last night, he said, you stood up for one of ours when nobody else would. A murmur moved through the crowd. Daniel blinked. One of yours? He repeated. Mike gestured toward Ethan. That man right there, he said. He's family. Daniel looked at Ethan again. The leather vest, the patches, the quiet strength behind the eyes. It made sense now, more than it had last night. I didn't know that, Daniel said. Mike nodded. That's the point. He stepped closer. You didn't know who he was, he continued. Didn't know what he represented. Didn't know who might come looking if things went sideways. Daniel held his gaze. I knew he needed help. Mike's expression shifted, just slightly. Respect. Real. Unfiltered. Yeah, he said. That's what we saw too. Behind him, more riders shut off their engines. The sound faded gradually, replaced by the quiet weight of hundreds of men standing still, watching, not aggressive, not threatening, present. All across the country, Mike went on, people saw that video, saw a man with nothing give everything he had for someone everybody else had already judged. Daniel felt the weight of those words settle into him. I wasn't trying to make a statement, he said. Doesn't matter, Mike replied. You did. Another pause. Then Mike reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Daniel. Take a look. Daniel hesitated, then took it, unfolded it. His eyes scanned the page, then stopped. His breath caught. It was a blueprint. Simple, hand-drawn, but unmistakable. A building, rectangular, with a front office, a work bay, tool racks, a sign above the door, Brooks Auto. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. This, he whispered. This is your place, Mike said. Or at least, it will be. Daniel looked up sharply. What are you talking about? Ethan stepped forward now, standing beside Mike. We did some digging, he said, about what happened to you, about that shop. Daniel's grip tightened on the paper. You don't know anything about that, he said. Ethan held his gaze. I know enough, he replied. Enough to know you got screwed. The words were blunt, but they weren't wrong. Daniel looked back down at the blueprint, at the lines, the measurements, the details. It wasn't exact, but it was close enough to hurt, close enough to feel real. We found the lot, Ethan continued. Where your old shop used to be. Daniel's head snapped up. What? Still empty, Ethan said. Still for sale. Mike stepped in again. And as of this morning, he said, it's yours. The world tilted, just slightly. Daniel stared at him. That's not funny, he said. Mike didn't smile. I'm not joking. Daniel shook his head, backing up a step. No, you don't just buy something like that and hand it to somebody. Mike crossed his arms. We do. Daniel looked from him to Ethan, then past them, at the line of riders stretching down the street. Hundreds, maybe more. This ain't real, he said quietly. Ethan stepped closer. It is, he said. Daniel's chest rose and fell. This is charity, he muttered. No, Ethan said firmly. It's not. Daniel looked at him. Then what is it? Ethan didn't hesitate. It's payback. The word hit differently, stronger, cleaner. For what? Daniel asked. Ethan's eyes didn't waver. For showing up when nobody else did. Silence settled again, heavier now, deeper. Mike stepped forward one last time. You gave $15, he said. We're just making sure you get back what you should have had all along. Daniel looked down at the blueprint again, at the name, his name, on something that looked like a future. His hands shook, not from cold, from something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And it terrified him, because hope meant believing, and believing meant risking everything all over again. He swallowed hard. I don't know if I can take this, he said. Ethan nodded. I figured you'd say that. Daniel looked up. Then why bring it? Ethan gave a small, almost tired smile. Because this isn't about whether you take it, he said. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? Ethan glanced back at the riders, then at the empty lot across the street, then back at Daniel. It means, he said, we're not asking. Before Daniel could respond, engines roared to life again, one by one, then all at once, and suddenly. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a beginning. The engines roared louder now, not chaotic, not reckless, controlled, purposeful. Daniel stood frozen as the sound surrounded him, vibrating through his chest, through the pavement beneath his feet. The riders moved with precision, some pulling off toward the empty lot across the street, others dismounting, removing helmets, revealing faces that weren't what the neighborhood expected. They weren't angry. They weren't looking for trouble. They were working. What are they doing? Daniel asked, his voice barely cutting through the noise. Ethan didn't look away from the lot. Something that should have been done a long time ago, he said. Across the street, the first group of bikers stepped onto the overgrown property. Weeds had claimed most of it. Broken concrete, rusted scraps, the ghost of something that used to matter. Daniel knew that place. Even now, after all these years, his body recognized it before his mind could accept it. That's, he whispered. Ethan nodded. Yeah. Daniel took a step forward, then another, drawn toward it, like a memory calling him back. The crowd followed at a distance, murmuring, filming, trying to understand what they were witnessing. But this wasn't for them. This was for him. The bikers didn't wait for permission. They moved like they'd already decided. Gloves on, tools out. Someone rolled open the back of a pickup truck, revealing lumber, equipment, materials stacked with intention. Daniel stopped at the edge of the lot. His lot. Or what used to be. For a moment. The noise faded again. Not completely. Just enough. Because his mind had gone somewhere else. Back. Back to a time when the ground beneath his feet meant something. When this wasn't just broken concrete and weeds, but a beginning of its own. I used to stand right here, he said quietly. No one interrupted him. I remember the day we opened, he continued. Paint was still drying. Sign wasn't even straight. But people showed up anyway. His eyes moved slowly across the space, as if he could still see it. The garage doors, the smell of oil, the sound of tools hitting metal. I thought it would last forever. Ethan stepped beside him. Maybe it still can. Daniel let out a small breath. Doesn't work like that, he said. Sometimes it does. Daniel shook his head. You don't lose everything and just get it back. Ethan didn't argue, didn't try to convince him. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out something else. A folded set of papers, more official than the blueprint. More final. He handed them over. Daniel hesitated, then took them, unfolded them slowly. His eyes scanned the page, then stopped. Property transfer. Ownership. His name. Daniel Brooks. He blinked. Once, twice. This ain't real, he said. It is, Ethan replied. Daniel shook his head again, stepping back now. No, he said. No, this is too much. I can't. You can, Ethan said firmly. I won't, Daniel shot back. That stopped everything. The noise, the movement, even the crowd seemed to quiet slightly, sensing the shift. Daniel looked at him, something stronger rising now. I don't need charity, he said. The words came out sharp, clean, final. For a second, no one spoke. Then Ethan stepped closer. Not aggressive, but certain. Good, he said. Daniel frowned. What? Ethan met his eyes. Because this isn't charity. The words hit harder than anything else had. Daniel stared at him. Then what is it? Ethan didn't look away. This is justice. Silence. Real silence. The kind that settles deep. Daniel's hands tightened around the papers. Justice. The word felt foreign, unfamiliar. He hadn't thought about it in years. Didn't believe in it anymore. Not for people like him. Justice would have been stopping it before it happened, Daniel said quietly. Ethan nodded. You're right. Another pause. But this, Ethan continued, gesturing toward the lot, toward the riders already clearing debris, measuring ground, setting lines. This is what happens when someone finally decides to fix it. Daniel looked around, really looked, at the men working, at the focus, the effort. No hesitation, no doubt. They weren't building something new. They were restoring something that had been taken. And suddenly, it didn't feel like charity anymore. It felt like something owed. Richard Cole stepped forward then, his presence grounding the moment again. I spent most of my life believing in systems, he said. Banks, contracts, processes. Daniel glanced at him. And? Richard's gaze moved across the lot. Systems fail, he said. People don't. Daniel studied him. You don't even know me. Richard gave a small, almost knowing look. I know enough. Another engine revved nearby. A group of riders lifted old boards, clearing space where the foundation would go. The work had already started. Without him. Without his permission. Because it didn't need it. Daniel looked down at the papers again. At his name. At something that looked like a future. And for the first time, he didn't feel like it was being handed to him. He felt like it was being returned. Slowly. Very slowly. He took a step forward. Onto the lot. The ground felt different beneath his feet. Unsteady, but real. Ethan watched him, saying nothing. Richard did the same. Because this part, this choice, had to be Daniel's. He moved further in, stopping near the center, the place where the main bay used to be. He closed his eyes for just a second, then opened them. And something inside him, something that had been quiet for years, shifted. Not fully, not completely, but enough. He looked at Ethan, then at Richard, then at the men working, and finally, he nodded. Just once. Small, but undeniable. I don't know how this ends, he said. Ethan gave a faint smile. Neither do we. Daniel let out a breath. Then, for the first time in a long time, he stepped forward not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he chose to, and reached for a tool. The hammer felt unfamiliar in Daniel's hand, not because he didn't know it, because he hadn't held one with purpose in a long time. For a moment, he just stood there, the weight of it settling into his grip, his fingers tightening slowly as if his body was remembering something his mind had tried to forget. Around him, the work had already taken shape. Boards measured, lines marked, voices low but steady, calling out dimensions, passing tools, moving with a rhythm that didn't need instruction. 600 riders, not loud anymore, focused, intentional. Daniel looked down at the patch of ground beneath his boots. then swung the hammer. The sound, sharp, solid, real. It echoed through him, not just in his ears, in his chest, in the part of him that had been quiet for too long. He struck again, and this time, it didn't feel strange. It felt right. The hours moved differently after that. Not slow, not fast, just forward. The frame of the building began to rise piece by piece, like something that had been waiting all along, just beneath the surface, ready to come back the moment someone believed it could. Daniel worked without thinking about the cameras, without thinking about the crowd, without thinking about the video that had spread his face across the country. He worked like he used to, measured twice, hit clean, moved steady. And every now and then, he'd stop, look around, at the men beside him, at Ethan carrying lumber like it weighed nothing, at Richard standing back but watching everything, not as an outsider, but as someone invested. And for the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel alone. By midday, something else began to happen. The neighborhood changed, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. A woman approached the edge of the lot first, then another, then a man who had once crossed the street to avoid Daniel altogether. They didn't come with tools. They came with hesitation and something else. "I brought some water," one woman said, holding up a case awkwardly. No one turned her away. Another man stepped forward, holding a box of gloves. "For the workers," he said. Then more came. Coffee, sandwiches, folding chairs. No one announced it. No one organized it. It just happened. Like something had shifted in the air, and people were finally responding to it. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. But he didn't stop working. Not yet. When it wasn't until later, when the sun had climbed high enough to cast clean shadows across the lot, that someone approached him directly. It was the man from the gray hoodie, the same one who had laughed the night before. He didn't look the same now. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure how to stand still. "Hey," he said. Daniel kept working for a moment longer, then looked up. "Yeah?" The man hesitated, then spoke. "I was wrong." Simple, but heavy. Daniel studied him, didn't respond right away. "I shouldn't have said what I said last night," the man continued. "Didn't know what I was looking at." Daniel leaned on the handle of the hammer slightly. "You knew enough," he said. The man nodded. "Yeah," he admitted, "just chose not to see it." Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just honest. "I see it now," the man added. Daniel held his gaze for a second, then nodded once. "That's something," he said. The man exhaled, like he'd been holding that apology longer than he realized, then stepped back. Didn't try to fix anything else. Didn't over-explain. He just left. And somehow, that was enough. As the afternoon stretched on, the structure took form. Not finished, not complete, but undeniable. You could see it now, the shape of something real, the outline of a future. Daniel stood back for a moment, wiping his hands on a rag someone had handed him earlier. He looked at it, really looked. "This is happening," he said under his breath. Ethan stepped up beside him. "Yeah," he said. "It is." Daniel shook his head slightly. "Feels like I'm gonna wake up." Ethan smirked faintly. "If you do, 600 guys are gonna be real confused." Daniel let out a small laugh, the first one that didn't feel forced. They stood there for a moment, watching. Then Ethan spoke again. "You know," he said, "you could have walked away last night." Daniel didn't look at him. "I almost did." "But you didn't." Daniel shrugged. "Didn't feel right." Ethan nodded. "Yeah," he said. "That's the part people don't get." Daniel glanced at him. "What part?" Ethan met his eyes. "That it wasn't about the money." Daniel looked back at the building. "No," he said. "It wasn't." By evening, the work slowed. Not because it had to, because it had reached a natural pause. The frame stood solid, clear, undeniable. The crowd had thinned but not disappeared. People lingered, watched, some still trying to understand, others already changed by what they'd seen. Richard stepped forward again, standing beside Daniel as the last of the tools were set down. "You built something today," he said. Daniel shook his head. "We built something," he corrected. Richard gave a small nod. "Fair enough." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Daniel spoke. "I spent 10 years thinking it was over," he said. "That everything I had was just gone." Richard looked at the structure. "Nothing that real disappears," he said. "It just waits." Daniel considered that, then nodded slowly. "Maybe." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lot. The light softened, warmer, and in that light, the building didn't look like a memory anymore. It looked like something alive, something growing, something real. Daniel took a step forward, ran his hand along one of the beams. Solid, steady, his. Not because it had been given to him, but because it had been returned. And for the first time in a long time, he believed it might actually stay. Later, as the last of the bikes prepared to leave, engines rumbling back to life in waves, Daniel stood at the edge of the lot, watching. Ethan approached, helmet in hand. "You good?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "Yeah." A pause. Then Ethan extended his hand. Daniel looked at it, then shook it. Firm. Real. "You changed something," Ethan said. Daniel shook his head. "No," he replied. "I just didn't walk away." Ethan smiled faintly. "Same thing." He put on his helmet, then paused. "If you ever need anything..." Daniel raised a hand slightly. "I know where to find you." Ethan nodded, then turned, heading back to his bike. The engines grew louder again. Then one by one, they pulled away, leaving behind something that didn't fade with the sound. Daniel stood there long after they were gone. The air quiet again, the lot still, the building standing in front of him. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he lost. He was thinking about what came next. He glanced at the old piece of cardboard still tucked near the edge of the lot, the place he used to sleep. Then back at the structure rising in front of him. A small smile touched his face. Not big, not dramatic, but real. Because sometimes, it doesn't take everything to change a life. Sometimes, it only takes $15 and the choice to give it away. When Daniel Brooks picked up that hammer and struck the first nail into the ground where his life had once fallen apart, he wasn't just rebuilding a shop. He was reclaiming a name the world had taken from him. This story reminds us that one quiet act, done without witnesses, without expectation, can carry more power than 1,000 loud words ever could. Real change doesn't start with recognition. It starts with a decision no one else is brave enough to make. Next time you see someone struggling, don't overthink it. Just show up, like Daniel Brooks did. Because sometimes, the smallest step you take for someone else becomes the turning point they never saw coming. If this story meant something to you, comment 1 below and tell me, would you have made the same choice Daniel did that night? Stay with me, because the next story might change the way you see people forever.